Impakt online on group formation and POW. This event is about the presentation of two projects that Impakt has been supporting. And first of all, that's the annual Net Art Lounge. Within the theme of Capitalism Catch-22, our online curators Sabine, Niederer and Raymond, Taudin, Chabot have commissioned two artists to make an online project. They will tell everything about it. There's some projects on view on the foyer of the Dekker, and they will present this themselves. And secondly, we will start with Cher, our curator for 2012 festival, together with Samantha Culp, who can't be here today. She will present the ongoing research that has been, your work still after the 2012 Normal Westerns theme, and POW stands for Post-Westernism. Present today are Karen Lotfi and Katja Navitskova, and they will start this event today. Get them a warm applause, please.
Yeah, if you want to. If you want. Kareem's like, no thanks. Oh, wait. Okay, thanks. Great. All right, so hi everyone. My name's Cher, and this is Katja. And it's exactly as Ilke was saying. We did the Impakt Festival last year, and then kind of based on research that we had done before, but then realizations we had during the Impakt Festival, we decided to launch all of the research that we had been doing on a single online site. And so this is the launch of that site at this year's Impakt Festival, and I'll give you a little bit of a background into it, and then we'll have a conversation with Katja and Kareem, who will both be, Katja will be the first interview that we transcribe on the site, and Kareem is on what we're calling the portal, which is a kind of online gallery. Okay, so to begin, POW is it's a kind of post-Western salon, I guess, and we were thinking in the context of brick and bricks and basic and ENA and N11s and MICT and China Africa and China India, it's very clear that there's some kind of a cultural or associated cultural change that will happen with that as well. So POW is for post-Western. It's not an ism so much as a counterclaim or an echo from the future. To give you a really quick introduction to myself, I began as a forecaster and worked in forecasting for 5 years, and now have just moved to the V&A Museum in London to curate a show on the future, and also run a design group in London called Alter Futures, which looks into kind of alternative futures by synthetic biologists, filmmakers, and designers. And then to tell you a little bit about Samantha Culp, so that you can get a context of where this is all coming from. Samantha is American but lives in China and has done for about 8 years. She's a Chinese media culture expert and an independent curator. So the two of us together were really fascinated by this idea of living in places that you don't come from, because I'm South African, and also kind of watching the kind of hybrid cultural flows that seem to be happening in a kind of more and more exacerbated way. Okay, so to give you an introduction to POW, the possibility that Europe and America's economies may not play a dominant role in our future forces us to think about what a global mediascape, one that can no longer be called Western, might look like, and how it might affect the way we practice culture. So in 2008, Samantha, who was the co-curator, and I began a series of commissioned forecasts on contemporary art and design. And that kind of interest expanded into a 4-year-long investigation into what you could call post-Western practice. After 12 reports, including things like Third World Futurism, global hypercultures, China-Africa arts, and JPEG politics, and having spent time with artists and designers in the US, UK, China, India, Indonesia, Senegal, South Africa, Russia, and Brazil, Ariane asked us to co-curate the Impakt Festival, which was titled No More Westerns. So No More Westerns was a title that we really, really liked because it was quite hard-hitting and quite provocative. It was also quite ambiguous in a way because it kind of applies to genre, but also, of course, to regionality. But working under No More Westerns also made us realize something that post-Western wasn't, which is that it's not a claim that there should be no more West. And although it was never understood or proposed as that way, it was a way that people seemed to take it and to understand it. And that isn't really something that we were trying to say. So in post-colonial theory, the cry of no more Westerns declared that the world had already had a mass of Western thought and that it was time to tilt the balance. But this is definitely not something that we wanted to say. It is a useful construct, but now we're much more interested in attempting to map out emerging cross-currents of cultural flow. So this is actually a really beautiful image by an artist called Michael McGarry, who works in South Africa but has done a lot of work in China. And he studies African immigrants who move across to China and the kind of lifestyle that they have and how China has an increasing awareness of Africa and the strange kind of hybridity that emerges from these two cultural meetings. This is another one of his. So things that make the needle on the POW meter jump are indigenous innovation, a rush of internet presence from outside of the West, and artists and designers excavating alternative histories, and just as importantly, alternative futures. So this actually is Maureen Mataza, who at the moment is the artist in residence. Is she still?
Next year.
Next year. She's going to be the artist in residence at Impakt, which she's really excited about. So discussions on post-Western futurism, which is really the part that we were interested in, occur on online platforms. There's a really amazing blog called Africa as a Country, which is a kind of news site that constantly reports on updates from Africa and, of course, plays with this idea of Africa constantly being discussed as a country as opposed to a continent. And also disparate memes such as futuristic machines. However, it seemed that all of these impulses hadn't been collected into a single event or exhibition or a virtual space. So as part of No More Westerns, young artists, most of whom had never exhibited in Europe, were invited to critically explore ideas of multi-directional cultural flows, hybrid visual languages, and far-flung speculations on a south-south arts axis that bypasses the New York City, London, Paris track. Now, this is actually something that really is in discussion, actually. There's a big event called the Design Indaba in Cape Town, and the Design Indaba is in discussion with Rio and Shanghai, and they really are actually trying to set up a kind of alternative cultural axis that can be in constant communication with the northern cultural axis, just as a way of trying to have an impact while still being connected to your own locality. So it seemed really important to document all of these kind of movements and artists, designers, critics, writers, and put them on an open platform. And this platform we've called POW. So this is the opening page, and this is Kareem Lotfi's work. This is Kareem over here, who we desperately tried to get over for last year's Impakt, but he couldn't get a visa. Typical situation. I have this problem all the time. But so this is the first page, and we're calling it the portal, and it functions as a kind of online gallery. Okay, and then these are the themes that we'll be dealing with within the blog are, of course, the portal, and we'll change that every 2 weeks. So it'll be a kind of constantly evolving shop front or kind of like collection device. Then we'll be documenting arts and design, dialogue and text, events, found posts, and nodes. Nodes is something Samantha's really interested in, but basically it's kind of isms that seem to connect to this idea. Okay, so I'll give you a really quick introduction to just a few of the artists that we covered at the show and that we'll cover on the site as well, to give you an idea of how different practices are relating to this idea of post-Westernism. So the first one is a group called Foundland. Does anyone know them? Yeah, I'm sure. They're based in Amsterdam, so some of you may have heard of them. And so Foundland is a young art design and research practice. They investigate how Syrian propaganda movement borrows from internet imagery, and in Impact Festival last year, specifically Disney imagery, and then kind of reappropriates this kind of Disney icons as propaganda and protest for the Syrian revolution. Another artist that we were really interested in was Babak Radboy, and he's working with a friend of his called Item Idem, and they've started something called the Shanghai Biennale. So the idea is always that you would kind of have an idea, send the idea to China possibly, have it manufactured and sent back to you. And they were really interested in this idea of what it might mean to actually just send the entire creative process to China and have it been sent back to you. So it's really this idea of kind of like relocated manufacture, and of course plays with the idea of globalized labor, authorship, originality, and design itself. And then as we move on to videos, so we'll cover video as well. This is a great young artist called Lu Yang. She's one of our favorites, actually. She's based in Shanghai, and she plays with this really, really bizarre point between culture and synthetic biology. So in this case, she has a video game that she's kind of analyzed the ancient Buddhist cosmology according to the tools that they might have as kind of player gods. I'll give you a quick... let's see. Oh, no. Okay, and then I think we're really interested as well as in like alternatives to Hollywood. So this is part of the Nollywood movement, which I'm sure everyone's heard of, a film coming out of Nigeria. This particular one is called Abonsambesu, or the translation is A Devil May Cry. And what's really fascinating about it is that it's actually a movie based on a Japanese video game. So already you've got the kind of quite interesting hybrid. And it features, amongst many things, a woman being sucked into a television, a naked CGI devil thing leaping out of the ground and hitting someone over the head, and the world's most surreal CGI lion. And so something that Katja is going to talk to us a little bit more about is post-internet art movement. And I think in many ways this could be considered a kind of counterpart to that, actually. Here we go. I think what's really fascinating about this is a kind of digital overlay, and it's a really overt digital overlay. I mean, there isn't any kind of attempt to combine these two layers. And then another section on the site that we'll be covering is events. So two events that we've held so far that kind of happened before we launched the site, but so kind of preemptory events in a sense, was that we moved one of the Alta Features sessions to Shanghai and asked kind of Shanghai innovators and artists to come in and present their ideas on the future. And Samantha's just started a project in China called the Tulo Open House. And it's kind of really, really ancient architectural building called the Tulo. I don't know if anyone's seen them. They're those kind of round buildings and everyone lives inside. And it's a deserted building that they're turning into a place of residency. We'll also be looking at the idea of speculations, so alter-evolutionary species and future cities, such as the kind of things Michael McGarry, again, is looking at. So the image in the back that you can't really see very clearly is Lagos 2027, and it's presented as a kind of science-fictional high-rise megalopolis. And then the hybrid vervid monkey. And then also speculating on alternative economic systems, and I guess that's why it starts to really tie into this year's Impact Festival. So I guess with regards to post-Western, the kind of things that we're collecting that we think are really interesting is that China, during the shutdown of the American government, China called for the dollar to be replaced as a global reserve currency. The LA Times said, upset that the US fiscal impasse threatens to trigger a default that would roil financial markets worldwide, Beijing suggests building a de-Americanized world, which is a pretty big statement. And then, of course, Dilma Rousseff of Brazil is trying to promote building an alternative internet route between Brazil and Europe that doesn't bypass America, because she found out that, of course, that her communications have been hacked by NSA. And this is something that is, of course, being supported by Germany. And then something else that's not spoken of much, but that's really interesting, is that the World Bank report earlier this year indicated that for the first time ever, the trade between global South countries, which are called South-South trade, actually surpassed their trade with the OECD. So this is a really big milestone for the global economic system. Something else that's pretty interesting is that the Zimbabwean dollar has collapsed. It collapsed in 2009. I don't know if anyone knew, but apparently now you use mostly the American dollar within Zimbabwe, and because the American dollar is, it doesn't have basically it's kind of too much money for how much things cost there, and there isn't the small change that can kind of deal with that or absorb it. So there's a whole alternative economy that exists below the note exchange, which is all through airtime. So you can just kind of swap airtime. So, and it's literally, apparently it takes 8 seconds. It's really quick. You get confirmation on your phone. So you can go in and buy a Coke, get 20 cents change, and it'll go into like airtime on your phone. And it's actually based on a system that comes from Kenya. Now, this is a pretty cheesy image, and I thought it was an interestingly cheesy image because it's actually was sourced from a website called Global Envision, which absolutely supports the expansion of global economy. And it says, we understand that the free market system affects our neighbors all over the globe. It can benefit us all, and our chances of it can better our chances that the global economy will thrive for the prosperity of all if it spreads through the world. So a very kind of utopian capitalism. And then again, as alternative economies, a quick story I wanted to tell you. I went to Madagascar 2 months ago, and there's the most incredible kind of dual economy existing there. And the one is, of course, their kind of formal economy, and the other one is the trade of cows, which are called zebu. And this actually functions as a stock exchange. It happens once a week. People kind of keep their cows with different members of their family and literally go and draw the ones they want, almost like an ATM, and then take them to this market and exchange them for money. And this is it's really embedded within the culture there. So there is this kind of like zebu note duality. And so then the final thing on the website is a connection to the Tumblr site, which we've been working on for 2 years, and it's really just a series of images that function as a kind of speculation, because of course we are trying to map out something that's changing, but we don't really know what it is. Okay, so power aesthetics, as we're calling them, are kind of cool, but cooler is possibly or cooler is the possibility of a truly new set of relations and conditions in the world. Or at least maybe the opportunity to try and explore some of these possibilities as genuine possibilities and not just thought experiments. But also cool, or as Sam says, cold, is the need to look very critically at both power in itself and its potential for new forms of exploitation and imbalance. So with this idea of power, it doesn't come that there is any kind of like massive celebration of the economy moving to the south. That's absolutely not the case. And it's also, it's not an excuse to no longer critique Western power. It's, of course, something that we'd like to delve into really deeply over the next couple of years and try and like tweak out the difficulties within it as well. So power could be a new way of seeing or discussing the post-Western. It seems necessary to look at ideas like Afrofuturism, post-colonialism, globalization, and feminism. But just as important to look at new movements, or sometimes pseudo-movements, like the new aesthetic, post-internet, speculative fiction, speculative design, dark materialism. And all of these, I guess, will come with a kind of by necessity, kind of guesswork, cultural confusions, lost in translations, but these are all things that are quite interesting kind of entanglements. So moving on to Katja. We've got a section on the site that's called Dialogues, and the first person that we really wanted to put onto this section was Katja, who kindly agreed to come through from Amsterdam and have a chat with us. And so we'll record this, which I'll actually do, if you don't mind. And then we'll transcribe it, and it'll be the first... there we go. It'll be the first interview on the website. Okay, so this is Katja. I said to her that I won't explain her too much because I don't want to kind of get it wrong. And so maybe you can give us a brief introduction to yourself.
I now live in Amsterdam, and I'm doing a residency at the Rijksacademy as an artist. Before that, I graduated also in Amsterdam from Sandberg Institute Design Department. And originally I come from Estonia, which is next to Finland and Russia. And I'm ethnically not Estonian, and I grew up as a minority there in a way, so I always was a bit confused about the ideas of nationalism and where I belong and what I should be doing. So I just went along with my interests, and they were always in art and whatever kind of cultural studies. But in Estonia there was no such thing as contemporary art, or everything that was there I really thought is ugly and bad. So I kind of intuitively was thinking that I should be a designer for many years, and then finally when I was studying design in Amsterdam, I realized that I'm not a designer, I'm a bad designer, and the best fitting idea is still the art idea. It's just I realized that there's good art in the world made by my peers, and then I developed sort of a practice which is started from this kind of independent design idea of you can just experiment with visual strategies and try to kind of see the world through a lens of visual culture. And then I ended up in doing installations and publications and sculptures and websites. So now the work is just everything that I've learned basically throughout my life before I became an artist. And so the things that I will talk about with Cher is exactly the things that I was doing on the edge when I was transitioning from being designer into being an artist. And most of them were also collaborative, and it's before I even knew what I was doing, which is 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So a lot of things changed in 3 years, and
we'll kind of go through that process together now. I think Samantha and I discovered Katja, and we thought she was really amazing with this first project, which is exactly the project she was just talking about, one of her first projects while she was still at school. And it was called Expo 2020. And it was a kind of world expo of technology and improvement and kind of utopian futures set in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it had, I think, something that we found really interesting and that we've been looking into a lot is this idea of kind of regional innovation and how a lot of parts of Central Africa are kind of not quite really embedded in industrialism yet, and yet are kind of already having post-industrialism laid onto the country. So there's this kind of pre-post-industrialism effect that's happening, which is quite fascinating and kind of leading to whole new historical structures that we haven't quite been able to understand yet. And so that's exactly why we thought this was really fascinating, because in Katja's work it's a kind of hyper technological innovation then imposed onto a really kind of local landscape.
I can add something that the project is a group project, so it's me and and some other people that we did it together, but the images that you will show I think are all done by me. And the reason that I can also say a few words about this Expo 2020 project. The idea was that we would do a kind of a visual simulation of a world fair in the future in 2020. And the reason why we took Democratic Republic of Congo is, first of all, it's one of the largest failed states, and it's one of the most dangerous places on earth right now. But it's also the most rich in natural resources, and it's in a way origin of humankind in some ways, in terms of like species. And then on the other hand, Congo has this history with Belgium, and Belgium was it's a place where they did the first world fairs in early 20th century and late 19th century, and a lot of Belgian wealth was coming from absolute like horrendous things they were doing in the Congo. And there was, and in one of the world fairs, I think it was early 20th century, they had a human zoo with people from Congo, and it's like a very heavy thing. And another thing is that the Congo, the natural minerals that are coming from the Congo are in a way the source material for most of the computers and mobile phones, and people, I think it's like became this common knowledge that coltan and some other minerals, so the sort of the whole economy of computers is based on these illegal mines that are, and most of the rebel fighting and most of the fighting in the region is for the control of these mines. So like the source of the expanding technological civilization is in these dirty mines in the jungle, and we would just wanted to make this basically a project about gentrification of the world, of how Olympics and world fairs and football championships, soccer championships, they're all a way for this sort of neoliberal machine of global gentrification to go from place to place, from Beijing to Johannesburg to now they're going to Rio, and it just brings a flood of investment, and it brings a flood of like construction and innovation, and this sort of basically gentrifying the area. Like in Beijing, they destroyed the whole town just to build like all the stadiums. In Shanghai, there was the World Fair in 2010. They also destroyed the little city just to build it.
Now it just stands empty.
Yeah. And then in the process of, so we wanted to make basically a story where we invent the 2020 World Fair, which will be about gentrifying the Congo finally. And because the landscape is so vast, the projects would be vast. So we thought of like national pavilions that are sizes of gigantic, like super high-tech, almost surreal structures, as you see here, and basically the other rule was that none of us have ever been in the Congo, so the whole research would be done from us Googling things, and like Googling about future technologies, Googling about Africa, and not even like caring, this is Congo or is this Ghana, it doesn't matter, it's just Africa, let's just all put these images together, this looks like jungle, it's South America, I don't care, it's jungle. And we're doing this kind of naive almost act of just making collages from concepts and visual collages, and in the end it was kind of a book that we did, like an official catalog for Expo 2020, and these are images, and this is an image, this is like an African pavilion, and it was like a coincidence, but while we were working on the project we also went to Shanghai for the World Fair there in 2010, and we saw how Africa is positioning itself in all these African national pavilions, and how other countries and how Gulf countries are positioning themselves. So that was also part of the research, the actual experience at the actual World Fair. So then I think you're just going to show some pavilions. And so all the pavilions, all the projects this is like a design idea for a pavilion for Desert Tech, which is this infrastructural solar energy pavilion, but it's just completely a simple collage also.
I read online that you were talking about this idea of search mode, and it kind of relates to this idea of just being able to Google things.
Yeah.
But it's quite interesting that you would kind of operate as an artist in a kind of search mode. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just that I'm a visual artist, so my best tool to somehow synergize some truth about the world is through visual connections. And that's just what this project is about also in the end, just to create weird images that have some kind of futuristic potential, but in a way it's also a naive one, and they contradict each other, and we don't know if it will ever happen. But like looking at the things that you're looking about how fast African continent is actually developing, it kind of approaching that in a way, or something. Yeah.
And that's what we thought was really interesting about Katja's work, actually, is that it looks like a kind of totally imaginative image, but when you, and it's this image actually, the next one is called Trapped Rainbow Effect using metamaterials. But when I was looking up Katja's reference to do this interview, it's actually surprising how many of these things truly exist. So earlier this year, a guy called Haifeng Hu published a paper on trapped rainbows. And actually, this is a technology that is being developed. I'll explain it to you, but good luck with understanding it. So it's the potential for controlling the velocity of a broadband light in guided photonic structures, which opens up tremendous opportunities to manipulate light for optical modulation, switching communication, and light matter interactions. Do you know what it is?
Go to the next slide.
Yeah.
It's basically about creating invisibility cloaks. It's about how you create a material that is able to reflect light in a way that it reflects reality around it, to the point that you have an effect of a transparency. So like the Harry Potter invisibility cloak, that's trapped rainbow effect in this context of metamaterials. And I was just naively Googling these things and then trying to make collages. So there's this guy in a refugee camp wearing a wearing an invisibility cloak, and just see what happens, why not? And that's it. It's just like, but because we created hundreds of images, so that's every image has this little element.
And then this is something that you actually referenced before, and I thought it was quite interesting, is that if you Google search this image and try to find the origins of it, then the origins are actually the Batois woman. The image is called the Batois woman with traditional pottery, and it's from the Batois region, which is not in the Congo. But then it was renamed the Chocho woman going to the market to sell their high-tech goods. And I thought this was really interesting, actually, this kind of like very easy use of stereotypes. And actually stereotypes is something I'll come back to later, which has become a big part of your practice through stock images. Yeah,
and it's like National Geographic, basically this idea of making a National Geographic report on something in 2020 in Africa by a person who has never been to Africa. And that's the kind of the game. And this is also, again, like combining this traditional image of this traditional people going to the market or doing something, and then I would just make these crazy hats or whatever objects on their heads that they're carrying that are made from some form of futuristic material. But what they actually are is just random 3D models that I found online. And some of them are topological mathematical, like basically virtual objects, topology as this area of mathematics where they explore multidimensional spaces, and they visualized in this way. So the green one and the pink one are this, and the yellow one, I think, are all these topological spaces. And the one with like a monster is just a monster from a 3D monster, but then I just take them, isolate them as this potential future objects which we don't know what's their function. So just this basic visual collage done in Photoshop in 10 minutes, it becomes something of a story.
Which leads us really nicely, actually, onto the next question. So Katja did also in 2010 what she called the Post-Internet Survival Guide. And for a lot of people, this was kind of the point at which people were like, okay, so post-internet art is a movement in the art world. And of course it had existed before that, but this is what a lot of people connected to. And actually a really fascinating thing that you're talking about, this idea of search modes and just kind of looking at places through Google, made us really wonder about what the relationship was between post-internet and post-Westernism. And I think there's definitely a connection there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the connection is obvious, like that you just explore, like the visual.
Yeah,
the internet
visual
is a source of
accessibility without the understanding of it. Almost.
The internet is a source of immense amount of visuals, and you can engage with them on their own terms, and everybody can do that who has a computer everywhere, and somehow there's more innovation. It's more innovative that we can even put it into words. Just the amount of experimentation that is happening by young people on the internet and on Tumblr and everywhere. It's so going so fast, and in some of it is very deeply innovative in whatever you understand, your understanding of the world. So then it just goes like parallel to this cross-economical kind of experimentation as well, and then you end up with these incredible forms, like this computer game Nigerian movie. Or like some 16-year-old African immigrant kid living in Florida, kind of exploring the Florida and the African origin, and like Miley Cyrus and all together, and just this and just the easiness of how you can engage with images online is what's attractive for me, because I'm not a nerd. I don't like to just have one skill. So my skill is just to download a lot of images, and I think for a lot of people, it's just that's what they do.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Then I wanted to go quickly onto more current work actually of Katja's. So this is not one of Katja's work, but this is what happens when you Google the word stock or the words stock images. And essentially what you seem to have is stock as in stock market, also stock as in office stock seems to be pretty important, and then nature stock. And that seems to be the kind of like central themes almost with stock images. And interestingly enough, it's something that comes up quite frequently in your work as well, which have all got quite kind of direct comments on capitalism and ideas of growth. So I'll show a few of these. It would be interesting if maybe you could talk about some of them. Tell me.
Yeah, just go through, before go up again.
Yeah.
This is like a sculpture. This is an installation I did last year in a gallery in Berlin. So this penguin couple is a male and a female, and they're forming this perfect symmetrical arc, and they had a baby in between them, and I kind of got rid of the baby, and the photo is like a winner from a National Geographic photo contest from 2011, but I just took the penguins from the photo, and then I printed them on this aluminium display that you normally see in art trade fairs to like promote brands, but instead of brands, the promotion is of nature in a way, and then it has this kind of like the symmetry, for instance, as one of the nature's basic design tools, because there's a lot of symmetry within even the nature that has nothing to do with humans. Like there's no relationship between our idea of beauty and the way that penguins are living their lives, but it's actually happening that when they are living their life, they are forming these beautifully symmetrical arcs, whether we're observing them or not. So it's part of the nature itself to have visual beauty in a way. And then the logo on the background is the most, for me, it's like, I think it's the original logo, just two leaves forming like a crown or whatever it is, and it gets like, it is in pulp, in like Fred Perry logo, and it is in the logo of right-wing Greek party, the Golden Dawn. Like the symbol of these two leaves is kind of everywhere, and it's just nature, but again, because it's organized in a symmetrical way, it immediately becomes a symbol. But then the difference between image and symbol and nature for me is just, there is none in a way, it's just merging. So I'm just trying, and then also the thing is that it's in context of contemporary art, so it's almost provocative of how simple and like beautiful something you just take almost from a commercial world. It's basically like, Marilyn Monroe, but instead of Marilyn Monroe, it's a penguins. and then the rest of the work is kind of then the reason and kind of the thing that how stock images work is that they are this like super simple these archetypes of visual beauty or visual language that are just compressed into the simple images that people can use for different purposes. So I'm almost thinking about my work as this kind of just general image, but it's weirder in a way. So,
which takes us onto this, and it's a really interesting project that would be nice to hear more about. So it was held by DIS earlier this year or last year, right? This year, and it was called the Stock Issue. And DIS magazine had basically kind of watermarked a whole bunch of artists' work, and then also had done a series where artists watermarked their own images, which is quite interesting in terms of images circulating online and kind of an economy of just of images.
Just go further. There's this all like basically the idea of creating a stock image from an animal with this, I don't know, somehow I think maybe they speak for themselves. I don't know.
And then her work at the moment is called Growth Progress, and that's Growth Potentials, and that's in progress.
I'm doing this basically a series of like, as I did sculptures from the animals, from these iconic images, now I'm doing a series of sculptures from the arrows themselves, arrows that you find that signify the growth of the company and the growth of the business and this obsession with economical growth. And in a way, there's this similarity between this obsession with economical growth and how it actually is, which is this sort of weird curve that goes up and down. And I look at the similarity of how the economical curve goes and how the sort of biodiversity growth goes, how like life itself developed from 4 billion years ago to what we have now, and how it had this periods of massive expansion and massive extinction, and how it's kind of self-regulating system. There is no government to regulate, okay, we're going to expand these species, we're going to, like, it's just all a natural progression. And in a way, these curves are sort of merging now because so much of the the growth, the economical growth is responsible for the biodiversity decline in a way, but it's not so linear. Like somehow it has all these non-linear dynamics about how like the sort of the economical growth and the natural growth or decline will all bounce off each other. So I'm just bringing these things together and trying to just make some weird snake-looking creatures from these arrows themselves as part of my attempt to access the topic. But actually it will be researched in a new publication that I'm doing that is much more proper in a way than just these arrows that you see now. So hopefully it will get clearer next year when I'll publish a publication.
And then moving on to Karim, and Karim said something really interesting to me, so I asked him if he would do an interview, and he said, no, I'm just a rendering tool, the images are supposed to speak for themselves. So this is going to be an introduction to Karim that's going to actually be largely visual, so I'll go through the images and you can take a look. And then at the end there's 3 questions, and he's answered the questions with an image. And then if you have any questions, let us know, but otherwise enjoy the visuals. So this is actually the reason that we found and really loved Karim's work was this series that he did in 2012 called Tribal House. So the first question that we asked him was, you might be called an internet artist, would you agree? And if you were a post-internet artist, then how much importance or relevance do you give to the idea of... Yes, please.
The answer for this one.
Do you switch?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So that's the answer for the first... They all connected at the end, okay. But let's do it correctly. So would you call yourself a post-internet artist?
Yes.
All right, and how much relevance do you give to ideas of West or South?
No, really.
Could you give us a quick...
Yeah,
force you to speak.
For the first question about
Yeah.
being a post-internet artist, this photo, like the other photo of the
So,
black and white
Yes?
scan, it was done by an Israeli guy called Evi Azai.
Yeah.
He's one of the pioneers of today's graphics and visual language and in everything from how the architecture of the digital image is done to the rendering of the image itself through printers and computer screens. And first he was trying to become an artist, but later he said, yeah, I would rather play it from behind the stage and just direct things. So this was one of his early artistic tries in the 60s. He just made a scan of a drawing from Steinberg, the comic artist. And it's just, I really like that it had this timeless thing, that it's not futuristic and it's not past, and it's locked in between a dimension without time at all. So you cannot see it even as future, it's really somewhere in between the past and the future. And this is why I answered with this image.
Yeah.
Categorizing is seeing things through time, not through the whole process of the thing itself. And somehow you have to see the entity of the whole process as one entity. It's exactly as when I say what's a leaf, everybody will see the leaf as a green thing, and you don't see the whole process of the leaf, that when it was a seed and it will die as a yellow leaf. And to see this totality of life itself and just in everything and how you see it, this is why I like this image, that it just saw the future and the past of technology in just one image.
And then the final question was, what is your response to the idea of post-Western? And that'll be our closing slide.
It's just, I like this, when I was young, I really liked this cartoon. And then, of course, this character was obviously an Egyptian. And he was saying poetry about crocodiles in the Nile and just smoking pot, whatever. And I somehow re-understood my whole nationality from seeing it from the Western point of view, not really experiencing it from the local experience. Although I was born in Egypt and I grew up there, but I was always more close to how I was described from other. It's just seeing your reflection. It's exactly how you take your image from a mirror, just rather than looking at yourself to read. You take the one in the mirror as the truth. So I was trying to approach my nationality not by experiencing it, but seeing how others describe me. Okay, I'm like this, and I would do this. And this is why I thought this image would describe the idea of how a person from the outside, from the Western culture, would see post-Westernism. That it would just be a loop of
Reflections.
reflections. Yes.
Yeah. Great, and that brings us to the end. If anyone has any really pressing questions, otherwise I think we might move on to the next section.
Yeah, just say if anybody wants to ask anything or whatever, we're on Facebook and Google us and just ask. It's easy, it's just, in a way approachable.
Great. Okay, thank you. Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Sabine Niederer. This is Raymond, Taudin, Chabot, and together we curated this year's edition of Impakt Net Art, which is titled On Group Formation. Now, I just want to very briefly introduce, we have a few minutes, and then we'll take you to the actual works, which are exhibited upstairs. To briefly introduce the inspiration of this theme, and also tell you a little bit about the artists that we invited. So, with the festival theme being Capitalism Catch-22, we were thinking about how these commentaries on capitalism, alternatives, and we've seen some examples, some beautiful ones in Cher's presentation. Thinking about how these alternatives, commentaries, and protests when they become a collective effort. Like, what can you think about? How can you think about commentaries as a group formation? And we didn't.
come up with this necessarily ourselves, this idea of not being groups but group formation only. It's a Latourian idea that so Bruno Latour, ethnographer, anthropologist, philosopher, wrote a book in 2005 which is called Reassembling the Social. And he thinks about groups as a very dynamic thing, and writes, there are no groups without a rather large retinue of group makers, group talkers, and group holders. And he describes groups as moments. So there are no groups, there are only these instances of group formation. And other theories also tap into this idea of groups as moments in time. And for instance, Noortje Mares, a younger, let's say, philosopher who also actually did her PhD research with Latour, so not so far off, but studies about the social these days, like what is the social and when does it occur? And she describes how this kind of sociality and groups are only there when there's an issue to care about. So she talks about issue networks. Now there's a beautiful map here that is an example of how to map these issues and the groups that are active around them. Who made this, Arjen?
So Bureau d'études.
Bureau d'études, I thought so, but it's very colorful for them, so I was wondering. Yeah. So Bureau d'études, issue mappers of the first hour, I'd say. Another way of thinking about it, and that's Geert Lovink and Ned Rossiter, so let's say a new media critics or theorists, think about groups as organized networks. So when people start working together, they can start building sort of structures, collaborative structures, and they can occur globally or wherever because of new media, but let's say it post-internet stance, they also say, however much it leans on technology, it only works, or a group can only substantiate when they actually meet physically. Now there have been various, you need festivals like this, let's say, to actually become a group, if only for a moment. So inspired by these ideas of gatherings and groups and collective commentaries, we wanted to also think about current day ideas of commentaries on, of course, capitalism and also other issues. And I want to just mention one theory of a cultural thinker who, because I attended his lecture 2 weeks ago, he's called Michiel Schwartz. Now, for the Dutch people, I'm sure know him. He's someone who writes a lot about, maybe he's also a forecaster, but then a forecaster of today, let's say, what's happening in culture today. And he came up with this term, which he calls sustainism. Now, he did define an ism because he wants us to think about what's happening today as a new era of in which people like to share, like things to be open or open source, want to know where their stuff is coming from, want to be healthy, want to be sustainable. So there's this one trend, of course, one of many, that is very much, let's say green, but not just green. It's sort of he calls it doing more with less. So if modernism was less is more, then postmodernism is more and less is more, and then now there's doing more with less. Now, tongue twisters galore. But what we did is we wanted to invite people who think about group formation, but not necessarily who study it in a sense like issue mappers do, or network analysts do, or not necessarily in a collective, collaborative manner of creating a work. But we invited 2 artists in the end who are extremely different. And I'm going to just briefly introduce them, and then we can go upstairs and look at the work. One is Eric Beltram, He's a Mexican artist, and he also did Rijksacademie, so one of your former colleagues, let's say. And he created 5 short flash animations that are visible upstairs on 5 different monitors, thanks to, Bart, Arjon, who are here and produced this, made it possible. And what he looks at is how to think of us as a person or as a group or as a country, as a world, as a universe in terms of scale, like how to think about ourselves as the unit, or maybe a universe being built up in units. And he created, when we were talking about it first, we were thinking it's sort of a situationist info design of the world. Well, you'll see that it is very quite intense on a theoretical level, or he tries to grasp the idea of the self in relation to the universe in units. So thinking like an infographic or info visualization in the visual language. The other artist who was commissioned for this edition, so both works were made for this exhibition and also will be visible online on Impakt NetArt. And I have to say that Eric Beltran usually does not make animations. He does performances, makes graphics, but he made flash animations for this edition. And the other artist from post-Western, I thought to, Warren Sack, an artist, a software designer, theorist, who created a work very much inspired by Jasper Johns and his use of images that we all know so well, flags, targets. And he created a triptych of on something that we all also think we know, and that is that the US rely heavily on the Middle East for their oil. The work is called, and I have to read it up, I'm sorry, but it's a long title. It's called Things the Mind Already Knows. In May 2013, the US imported more crude oil from Canada than from any other country in the world, over 2.3 million barrels per day. Now, the first part of the title, Things the Mind Already Knows, is a quote from Jasper Johns. And what the second part, I should also say, is a piece of statistic information from the US Energy Information Administration. And I think it comes as a surprise to many that the US actually relies on Canada very heavily for their oil consumption. So playing with this idea of collective knowledge and collective imagery, he created a JavaScript animation as well, I guess, a triptych that shows the Canadian flag, an oil puddle, so the target of Jasper Johns becomes an oil puddle, and the American flag. So I would like to invite you all actually to join us and view the works of art in their beautiful glory upstairs or online. I just quickly put the link up here. And thanks a lot.